Hi, Wes from Glowshore. Welcome to Ken and David in our first ever Glowshore business chat. Ken, would you like to tell us how you got into property, please?
Yeah, so I bought my first property in 1993 when I was 21. And I then, by the time I was in my mid-20s, I managed to start buying some office blocks to convert into residential property. And then I started building some new properties as well. And sort of fast forward a few years, I then became interested in all aspects of property. So I started buying property companies, which had a mix of residential and commercial property. And then in the last 10 years, I've really focused on buying large-scale developments in buildings that I find interesting to look at, and preferably in sort of interesting locations as well.
That's fascinating. Your initial investment, did you buy and sell and make a profit and reinvest and so on, or?
Yeah, so did it in conjunction with my wife. So we both had a day job. So when lots of our friends were out going out in the evenings and the weekends, we worked full time during the day, and we spent our evenings and weekends working on our home, and then in a very short space of time working on several other houses at the same time as well. It took me a bit of time to actually step up to think I want to hire someone to do a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So that really helped us get started. Was actually spending a lot of time doing it ourselves and really learning everything. Learning how to plumb, plaster. At that time, you could rewire as well without being an electrician.
Brilliant. I don't know how you learned to do all that without YouTube.
Yeah, don't ask me to do any of it now. I can barely get the hook of that. I think when you're younger, you've got no fear, so you're just sort of faced with something and you just get on with it.
Yeah,
we didn't have a bathroom in the first house. I had a hose attached to a kitchen sink tap, and we didn't have any hot water because we didn't have a boiler. Yeah. And the toilet was in the garden, so you kind of wanted to learn really quickly. Going out in the morning where your hair froze, it was unbelievable. But it was a good baptism of fire, and it meant we had to learn things pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think what you do now is, you mentioned fairly big developments, but you do a lot of office blocks to residential. Is that right?
Yeah. So what's been quite interesting, I think we're seeing this a little bit with sort of high streets changing as well, is there's been a real difficulty in creating homes outside of very affluent areas. When I say affluent areas, I'm talking most areas of London and some key areas in the southeast. And sometimes the southeast unfairly gets chucked in, or all of the southeast gets chucked into the same mix, because there are still, Portsmouth is still a relatively affordable area. And affordable areas means it's quite difficult to build a new property and make a profit. And it's not about making developers very, very wealthy. It's about being able to create a business that's sustainable. So we really embraced the opportunity to buy office blocks and convert them into residential properties. At a personal level, we adopt new home size standards because we think there's a lot of responsibility in owning someone's home. And it isn't just about providing a safe and clean working environment for them to live in. It's actually about have they got windows? What do those windows look at? How many people are going to be living within that space that you create? So I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I'm disappointed that some schemes have been just profit driven, and people are trying to get as many units as they can in at whatever the expense of the incoming tenant. So we've really tried to work as hard as we can. And Wes, my business partner has been one of them in our latest office to resi scheme, which was 140 apartments. He individually designed every single kitchen. So we take a lot of care in what we try and do.
Actually, that's interesting. For somebody, myself, I'm not actually in the property area, but you've certainly read about those flat conversion or other industrial property conversions that do leave people in fairly dire living situations. So, presumably, in doing what you're doing there, are you appealing to a slightly different target market, or are you just actually doing it properly, as it were?
No, I think it's we're very keen that you've got to lead by example. So there's things that we do not because we have to, but because we think it's the right thing to do. So I have a particular passion around disability.
Yeah.
So within my office blocks, I want to make sure as many of them are fully DDA compliant as I can. And so when I'm looking at things like toilets, I'm not just looking at a disabled toilet that someone's designed, in an office on a piece of paper and thought, this is the least amount of space we can use. I want to create something where someone can go in, going to the loo is a private thing. They want to be able to go in, go to the loo, there's no fuss, and then go to their workplace. I don't want to be the person who's got an office block where there's one, disabled access loo on the ground floor and there's 12 stories of offices. So you've got to, kind of hope by the time you've gone from the 12th floor to the ground floor that A, no one else is using it, and B, you've allowed enough time to get in the lifts, or you can even get into the lift in the first place. So there's a lot which I get frustrated about. That is, a lot of people like what I maybe call bottom fishing.
Yeah.
It's just doing the least amount they can to be legal, where, we really want to try and set an example and, and tell as many people as we can as well, so they can actually think, do you know what? Giving up an extra 10 square feet, what's that really going to cost us in the overall scheme of this development? Nothing. But it could mean a lot to someone feeling that they're being treated appropriately and carefully. The same with the housing. We just don't think people should be offered a shoebox to live in, however someone wants to dress it up. Because it's just not fair, because people, it's not about giving someone a choice, because people always say, well, it's their choice to live there. Well, actually, if you're catering a product which is substandard at the end of a market because that's all someone can afford, that isn't a fair and reasonable solution. There needs to be a better solution. And if that solution is going to a local authority and saying, look, we need to raise the game here, this has to be a higher standard. If the developer needs certain elements of community infrastructure levy or whatever the associated costs are with PD, because it's not the affordable housing levy, the local authority should be looking at that. They should be looking at a way to encourage developers to deliver the right schemes in their cities that they can be proud of, and that everyone in the city can be proud of.
That's just wonderful to hear. Do you think there's a role for government then? Is there something in the current building regulations, housing standards, whatever the law is, that needs upgrading to sort of enforce that on the bottom feeders, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I suppose in one sense, the minimum size standards are, I think they're a good set of guidelines. It shouldn't have to be in stone, because you are trying to retrofit a new build standard into an existing building. And if part of what you're trying to do is to create better use for redundant buildings, then there's got to be maybe a little bit of a trade-off with another. But you can get some of these by putting in sliding doors. So you can go into old flat conversions and you can think, why is there some great big corridor that we don't need? Because actually, as soon as people own those flats, they want to get rid of those corridors and turn them into living space, or put some cupboards in, or do something else that you would tend to need. But there has to be a proper trade-off. There has to be a mature trade-off of thinking, how much money do I need to make, and what product am I actually going to be able to create on the back end of it? So if there's something that, if there's a trade-off on the sill payments that could be made, or something else a local authority can put into a mix that could make a developer say, actually, rather than say putting 90 units in here, I can maybe put in 80, because in real terms, I'm not really losing anything. But then if a developer has a scheme that they're already making a profit on, they don't need that input. It should be like self-assessment. They should be able to say, do you know what? I want to do the right thing for the right reasons. If I've got children, or it's somewhere that I would, maybe live in myself, I need to be applying that logic to what my product is going to be. And just because someone doesn't have a huge amount of disposable income doesn't mean that I should be taking advantage of them. They're just as entitled to have a good home, for their money, because at the end of the day, 30% of anyone's disposable income is still 30% of their income. If their income is £15,000 a year, or their income's £150,000 a year, it's still the same percentage.
Yeah. That's a question I'm thinking more. Industry trends. So you would have thought the Zoom, what's happened to us over the last year, must surely impact commercial property and residential property. You would think there will be people now realise they can work from home, so they don't have to live in the city. And there will be businesses, one would imagine, thinking I don't need expensive premises in the city anymore because a lot of my staff can work from home. That looks a superficial. Do you see that? Do you think that will happen? What will it mean for property development?
There's a few things which I think are really wrong with the way that a blanket policy is fitted to so many scenarios. One of the things around social housing which always bothered me was if I was building a block of flats, a local authority would say I'd have to nominate a certain number of those properties to be used as social housing. And if I was building one-bedroom flats, I would just have to nominate a certain number of one-bedroom flats to be handed over. I would speak to a local authority and say, well, surely you need housing because your biggest issue on the housing needs is around families. And it's actually providing good, safe, permanent locations for families rather than halfway house solutions that just keep shunting the problem from someone else. It's like a game of musical chairs, and we're not fundamentally addressing it. There's a big thing around areas being stigmatized with social housing, and which was just actually we're all human beings at the end of the day. Why is someone going to say this person is going to affect this area? But actually, if we want to be fully integrated as a society, we've got some great second-hand stock. So why shouldn't developers be providing renovated 3 and 4 bedroom family homes to local authorities instead of a whole pile of 1-bedroom flats that actually the local authorities don't really want? They want the family homes. But the family homes tend to come outdoor spaces. So you then get rid of this worry if we ever do have something like a lockdown again, of saying, well, where do the children go? Where can they let off steam if they've got to be homeschooled and things like that? So if we have an opportunity to create, more sustainable spaces for people to have in terms of housing stock with gardens or with balconies, then I think that has got to be a good thing. Years ago, I used to propose putting roof gardens on our blocks of flats. I can tell you every single local authority I spoke to said, you can't do that. You're going to have overlooking issues. They're going to be all looking at other people. And it's, well, hang on a minute. We're creating a garden. I haven't said how high the walls can be. It doesn't have to be about looking down. It's about your peripheral vision and looking outwards. So there's ways to manage that. So again, when we're looking at green measures and amenity space, why can't we create some of these within the apartments? People can have their own balconies. People can have a communal garden as well, so you can still have a sense of community. So I think one of the things which is going to come out of this for anyone who can make this decision is people are going to be saying, where is my space? If we have to lock down again and I need to have my own environment, where is that going to be? So I think a lot of thought needs to go into that, and people should be looking to design homes where people do have their own spaces. Having the opportunity to go out on a balcony doesn't mean that the balcony has to be the size of a regular back garden with a house. It just has to be some space. We have policies where people are so worried about pollution in cities that you can build apartments that don't have any opening windows. So imagine being in one of those apartments, and and I do feel for everyone who has been in that for the last year, where your only ventilation is mechanical ventilation coming in from the outside because someone has said we've got a pollution issue, so you can't have an opening. You can't have an opening window. Well, why aren't we addressing that? Why aren't we thinking what do we within these very concentrated areas of the city? Do we really need to have cars? Should we actually be thinking, when all of us have managed to get out on the streets and walk around a bit more, do we really need to have cars? Some people will need to have cars. Again, some people, who have mobility needs, could need to have a car. But again, that doesn't mean that we have to then say, well, if that person needs it, then everyone needs it. Because actually, you take a city like Portsmouth, it's pretty difficult not to walk to most of the places you want to get to in Portsmouth, where people will sit in a car for half an hour to go 1.5 miles. I mean, there's just no need to do it. I mean, why would you need to do it? So I think that's going to address it. The things around offices, we have live lettings going on, for serious amounts of space in different parts of the country all the time. So first lockdown happened. It was lovely weather. It was a bit new, and I know it was scary, and I don't want to sound crass or glib because I know people who have died from COVID, But everyone genuinely, there was a bit of fear, a bit of excitement, a bit of adrenaline, and the weather was nice when the first lockdown happened, and no one knew that it was going to last this long.
Yeah.
So, a couple of months in, everyone was thinking, why do I need to go to the office? I'm going to work from home forever. I mean, this is perfect. My kids are here. I could be in the garden, and it's all very nice. Next lockdown happens. Weather's starting to turn. Everyone's thought, I didn't think we were going to happen, in this sort of space again. Third lockdown's happened, and it's been a proper one again because obviously the death rate has been horrific, and heart goes out to everyone who's been affected by that. And it really felt that something had got out of control. And suddenly with the children at home, much harder to get them to go in the garden if it's chucking down with rain and it's freezing all day. A lot more homeschooling done as well, and people still having to work. So we've seen a lot of people say, actually, we do need to have another office space. I like the idea from being able to work from home, but actually, I do still want to go to an office. I think what we are going to see that is different is I don't think many firms are going to get away with saying our office hub is now just going to be in one city if they actually have people employed all over the country. Yeah. Because people are going to get fed up saying, why should I get on a train to go down to London, if I live in Sheffield? Why can't we have a hub in Sheffield as well? I'm not saying we don't need one in London, because there'll be a whole load of people from London working there as well. But I think we're going to start to see people say, we want to have a more democratized approach to our head office. So let's start having a few head offices around the country.
That's interesting. It's a slightly counterintuitive, because you might have thought, well, in the new world, don't come down to London, just pop on a Zoom. But I can see what you're saying. One of the conversations we had with the CEO of quite a big insurance outfit was they felt absolutely there was a need for people to get together, but no longer necessarily a need for them to have all 250 people at a desk 9 to 5 every week. So they were going to downsize. They were going to retain a presence in London, as it happened, but one that would cater for get-togethers and probably let half the staff on a sort of hot desking basis be there, but was probably half the size that they had before. Obviously, considerable saving to them. And it felt like that could easily be a trend. Have you seen any of that, or any reason to think it would happen?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, even before COVID, there was a lot of firms who didn't have 100% desk space for their staff anyway. So there was always an element, if some people's jobs, like surveyors, were involved in them being out on the road, they knew that if they had 100 members of staff, they still only probably needed 70 desk spaces because there'd always be that element of hot desking.
Yeah.
We do own a co-working business as well. And what we've maybe seen from that is that businesses are probably more interested now in having a good work environment, but rather than it being a hot desking or shared hot desking with other firms, they're probably more interested in having their own small office space within a co-working space, and then they can hot desk within that area. And we've got very large companies who are our clients in those spaces as well. One of the things I think people shouldn't forget is that actually going to work, a lot of people really enjoy that. They like the social aspect. When you're chucking an idea around, we have countless Zoom meetings, but when you're chucking an idea around, you could all be thinking you're going on a certain path because that's what you've been thinking about. You've been rehearsing it in your mind, you've been analysing all the situation. It could be a throwaway comment from someone else, and you then start thinking, oh, maybe I should start thinking down a slightly different path. So we all need that sort of interaction and input, just to make sure, even if it's just a tick box to make sure that we're on point. And quite often those ideas come out not at prearranged times. It's those casual conversations when your mind is allowed a bit more sort of lateral thinking. So it is quite tricky to think, get everyone on point. It's all going to be a meeting at 9 a.m. in the morning, and bang, 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 we're going to nail it there and then, because it doesn't always happen. That meeting can just get thoughts flowing, and then ideas and areas can evolve from there. So I think we're going to see people wanting to have the flexibility of some home working, but I do think that people will still want to have the opportunity to go to work, whatever form work takes. The other point I think it's also worth mentioning as well, that people of a certain age, once you're established, you might have your home that is quite permanent. and you already like what you're doing and you know how everything functions around you. When you're starting out in your career, you may still be renting different places once, twice a year, and you may not have had that sort of routine yet. So your routine has been going to the office. And, if you get to work in a very nice building and you have a very nice working environment, that's also quite nice. It's quite nice to go somewhere different where there's a bit of space, you're not constrained, and you can really sort of, spread out a little bit. So I think some of the commentary that I've seen, I thought has come from people who already have a very certain sense of where they are, rather than the guys who are starting out in their careers who think, actually, probably the most exciting building I'm going to go into won't necessarily be my home. It's actually going to be my workplace.
Yeah, funnily enough, the same CEO of the insurance company said very early in the first lockdown, they had a sort of jocular conversation, that they were, who's got the best office, home office or home working. It was all supposed to be a bit of a joke until they found they had staff that were literally working on an ironing board in the hall.
Yeah.
And, it rather sort of changed the perspective on how much fun this was for a lot of people. I mean, you guys back in the office, wasn't it?
No, we're not back in the office. Everyone's still working from home, mainly because a lot of the staff have young children. So the homeschooling that you mentioned, but you hit the nail on the head, Ken. We're looking at having obviously our office space, which is in our own sole occupation, and very much desktoping, giving that flexibility to people. And what we found is, I think there's going to be an input of possible mental health issues that come out from isolation, and not having that interaction with kind of your colleagues, basically. So it's similar to what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point, Wes. And one of the things, I really want to say how much we've loved and respected and appreciated all the support that Glowshaw has given our charity over the years. But one of the things about isolation and mental health, I'm a vice chair of Portsmouth Down Syndrome Association, is lots of people with Down syndrome and a learning disability have lived a very isolated life. And a large swathe of society has accepted that is fair enough. And what we're suddenly hearing more and more is people cracking under the pressure of isolation. And you don't want to say, but what about these guys? This has been their lives forever and a day. And even now, there isn't really a program to try and improve that. But I suppose in one respect, you're now experiencing what so many other people, have experienced. And the wider society has said it's fair enough because it's not happening to them. And maybe now people will appreciate how important it is for people not to feel isolated. One of the crazy situations we have in this country, as opposed to, say, a country like Japan, is, we've got this incredible talent in people who have retired, and we've got, chronic cases of loneliness in those people, where they have all that knowledge. They've already lived a large part of their life. They've got so much experience. And for some reason, society then sort of turns their back on them, and says, right, we're on to the next people now. And it's just this sort of like hunger for new talent to be involved with, rather than thinking we've got this, great resource in people who have, already, been children, grown up and had their working life. And people with learning disabilities are so dependent on someone else ensuring that they actually have interactions with other people. And it just, frankly, it isn't fair, because the network that's in place to do that is woefully inadequate.
Yeah.
And so I think if one positive thing can come out of COVID-19 and lockdown is that society wakes up and realizes a whole load of people have been marginalized forever. And if it isn't good enough for the rest of us, it shouldn't be good enough for them.
Yeah. That's a fascinating take. I'll be honest, that hadn't occurred to me, but you're quite right. This is giving us all a taste of a life that, as you say, people less fortunate have had to live with for quite a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we go through a situation where we're trying to help people with speech and language therapy. Yeah. We're trying to set people up as well as they can to access as much of mainstream life as possible. And within this area, we're really lucky. Our organisation has, I think, 3 times the national average inclusion in mainstream schools, because we're putting this work in from day one.
Yeah.
But we're pushing back and fighting so much stigma and so much red tape that we're now at the forefront of having formed an all-party parliamentary group with some other very, very well set up organisations around the country to try and create a policy for people with Down syndrome. Because there isn't a policy, there isn't an education policy for people with Down syndrome. It's the most commonly forming learning disability.
Yeah.
And there isn't a policy that even understands that people with Down syndrome just learn information in a slightly different way.
Right. Yeah.
So I can't say enough how important it is for society to say, we can't tolerate this anymore. If we can't tolerate it for ourselves, we shouldn't accept that it should be remotely acceptable for people who are reliant on our good graces. I mean, that is ultimately it at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. Do you see it as a central government issue, or because I've noticed in some of the conversation we just had about property development, you've emphasised much more local authority than central. Is this something that is better done with local people, or do you need to get the strategic framework in place first at government level?
Well, we need both. So from a government perspective, one of the things where a lot of organisations say we don't need these policies because we already have policies. Well, frankly, there are so many laws that people don't even know exist. I think there's been something like, I think it was a new tax law every 3 days has been introduced in the last 10 years. You wouldn't even think there was that many things you could tax. And that's just one aspect of it. So it needs to happen at both ends. One of the things, if you leave it just to central government, is everyone just points at central government. It says, there's the fault. It's all down to them. They haven't done it. And that's like the get out of jail free for everyone else. What we have to do as a society is take personal responsibility on all of these things. If we know that we can make a difference in whatever area we can make a difference in, it should be incumbent on us. I mean, we're all human beings are nice people at the end of the day. Circumstance can change that for some people, but actually we all want to try and help other people. It's not about preaching or ramming it down someone's throat. It's about just saying, let's just take 5 minutes and think, what could we do to make this more accessible for everyone? And that goes right through for us. That ethos goes right through from anyone we work with, any contractors we work with. It's about what's the bargain with them? They do some work, they want to get paid. Don't be that person who doesn't pay them. Just holds them out, because that just isn't fair. That then has a knock-on effect to everything else. So we all need to be working in sequence and in harmony with each other. So government needs to tighten up on creating better knowledge around what the laws say, and possibly introduce some amendments to the laws. But it's at a local level that we need to see changes. People actually have to say, I want to include everyone else. Everyone should feel that they have a relevant seat at the table. So, it's local authorities and government are voted in. They come and go. They have short time horizons on what they're doing. We're probably now seeing for the first time, real change in terms of the northern investment groups, in terms of the north of England, in trying to actually really make the north of England feel that they're part of the metropolitan policy that comes out of Westminster. And there's a huge amount going out around that. I mean, there's a northern policy group. What we've seen happen around the free ports is really exciting. A lot of people have put in a huge amount of work to create that in different parts of the country. And so none of these things happen without government, but that filters down into these local areas making a decision. Anyone who has a chance to do something in the local area, and when I say anyone means anyone. I congratulated someone on Twitter yesterday who set up a signing podcast with her brother when she was 15. She's now been on the TV. She's been on some great programs. Her brother's got Down syndrome. So there was a 15-year-old girl who said, I can see that something isn't right and something isn't fair. I'm going to make a difference. And I'm going to get on and do it. The last call I was just on was with a property investor, and he's got a young guy who's about 20 years old who's buying one of his properties. This guy, I know measuring success isn't about money, but this 20-year-old, drives around in a blacked out Tesla, looks as cool as you want to get. He's made over £10 million in what he does on YouTube. So we don't need someone saying you have to do this because this is the way that we used to do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how old you are. You don't need any money to start these things. And that's the best thing about the internet. Anyone can have an idea and make a difference. And the more what you do makes other people feel happy and included. The better society is going to be, because that's going to make everyone feel included.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've been involved with a local mental health charity, and that's their whole thing. Mental health is a comprehensive thing. You can't have this department helping you with that bit of it and that department helping you. So their whole the charity is built around self-reliance, very much local, do your own thing. And the difficulty we had was then actually engaging with the authorities to really get a bit of support and a bit of money for it. So and that's where that problem comes in. You get really good grassroots initiatives, but at some point you do need some help from above, and it's then wading your way through the entrenched interests to to get that help.
Definitely. I mean, we used to really try and deal with homelessness in Portsmouth in a big way. And we would house people who were properly homeless, living in the streets. And what we didn't realise is that there's organisations that were trying to help them into housing, but they hadn't actually addressed the issues that had made them homeless in the first place. And we said, well, we're only one part of that. We can facilitate accommodation. We can't help them with any of the other problems that they had, but we can hopefully try and make their life feel a bit more secure. And we would see so many agencies just drop away at that stage. I mean, it's been a few years since we did that, so it may have got better. But again, it's one of those things that when you come up with a solution, you can't just say, I fixed it now. I can get on with the next person.
Yeah.
Things are so nuanced in what can be a trigger and what can be helpful. Someone with Down syndrome could live independently, but if they had a problem and the boiler didn't work, if they reported it and no one fixed it, it would create a bit of a problem because they wouldn't know. They'd think, well, I've reported it. I'm not sure what else I'm meant to do. Yeah. Or classic one: tradesman says, I'm going to turn up at 8:00, and then they don't turn up. How many of us have had that, where someone with a learning disability might literally just wait by the front door because they think someone is due to come because everyone else arrives when they're meant to arrive because things are done by appointment. So there's all of those things that's just smartening up on that and tidying up on that is a way to not put unnecessary pressure on someone else. Because mental health is good that it's being talked about so much now and it's out in the open because it shouldn't be stigmatized. But there's so many things that we can all do to improve each other's mental health just by doing what we say we're going to do.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Have you ever come across Hilary Cottam's book, Radical Help?
I haven't, no.
No, I think you might enjoy that. That's a lady that's done a great deal with local authorities, but about with problem families, instead of sort of half a dozen different people come along and wag a finger, they get people thoroughly engaged day in, day out, ground up to try and sort of make their lives better. And it seems, it's got some good results.
Yeah. And one of the things when you're an organisation that people go to for help and want to rely on, we've had to have with our charity very, very tough conversations with people to put things in perspective. A lot of people with Down syndrome need open heart surgery when they're born. Open heart surgery, there's no nice way to dress up what that looks like. What is important for people to understand is the context of it, that within this area, you'll buy probably the best paediatric heart surgeons in the country. So if you're going to have it done, at least you're in the place that you can have it done in. And then we can get you to speak or help you to speak to another family that's had that done as well. If you have a duodenal atresia where your stomach's not connected to your intestines, again, it's quite rare in the general population, but it's more common in people with Down syndrome. Again, it's a big operation.
Yeah.
But one of the things I say to my son who had that is, you've got a proper pirate scar. He always points to my scars from rugby, which I've broken loads of. I've got a scar anywhere near like his scars. He's quite proud of his scar. It's a big one from one side to the other. So some of those things is, you can really bring people to the table by just, things can be scary and worrying, but it doesn't have to overburden someone.
Yeah.
Actually, it can be routine for the guys who are working in those sort of areas as well. And it's just having things then put into context, so you're not feeling like you're out on your own and in a limb. For us, again, with property, it's so important that we have, if there's ever a problem, because there's never an intention for there to be a problem with a property. If there's ever a problem with it, we just want to fix it as fast as possible. So there's no budget constraint in anything we do. It's nice to see actually that property investment is becoming a much more professional beast. I mean, you must have seen that, Wesley, and the types of clients that you're having with multiple property owners, and that's and institutions owning.
Yes, yeah, with the changes in legislation as well, there is a general increase, and some of the new landlords that are coming through as well that we're seeing are looking at exactly that. So quality of living, the space that's being provided, outside areas.
I think society generally is just going to be less tolerant of that kind of behaviour. Thankfully it is moving that way, isn't it? Something I did just want to ask you, Ken, was Grenfell. So the impact really on the industry of that, I mean, there must, I hope, be changes in building regulations and what have you, but the amount of construction work that has to be done there, and it seems to me that, and I might be quite wrong, you might have some insight, but the allocation of who ultimately was at fault there, I think reflects a little bit on they're trying to find somebody that has insurance that can help pay for it. So certainly that has impacted on the professional indemnity insurance market with other things, but hugely. So I just wondered what you're thinking around that.
Yeah, so I mean, interestingly, we had a block of flats where we converted some of it in the last, say, 6 years. And we already had a payout from the government to replace some of the cladding. So to put the cladding into context, none of this is about bad workmanship.
Yeah.
And there will be buildings where there's bad workmanship.
Yeah.
This is about a product that was put out by its manufacturers. It was tested. It was then agreed by building control and the people who will provide the new homes warranty that this was a fair and reasonable solution. It then got applied to the buildings. Then things were found out, which shows that it was quite horrendous outcome at Grenfell. Now, one thing, in a very simple explanation, is the systems, when they're designed, are designed in a laboratory.
Yeah.
No one in that laboratory is going to fix it the wrong way to the building. No one's then going to get a core drill and drill through it because they want to put a vent in. No one's going to screw a satellite dish onto it.
Yeah.
All of these things that suddenly create different travel areas and break through the integrity of the product. Now, this is before you even then look at saying, well, what is the product? When we look at products now and you think, what is the burn rate for these products? The burn rate is meant to be to design a barrier that gives people enough time to get out of their apartments.
Yeah.
What it doesn't then really look at is, well, what happens to the thing that's burning? Now, I'm looking very closely. There's a new product which is being developed at the moment. It's going through certification, which won't burn and disintegrate until it gets to 1,000 degrees.
Right.
And then what comes off that is dust, basically. It's powder. Current product can be dropping at 600 degrees, and it can be dropping lumps that are like 20, 25 kilos, that type of thing, off the building. So then you've got this problem, the people outside trying to save everyone, having, imagine 25 kilos dropping from 14 stories up.
Yeah.
No one's coming out of that alive.
Yeah.
So you've got all of those type of issues. And one of the things which, again, a little bit towards what I was saying about what we do in buildings, is trying to think, well, if we now have a product that we know is going to work, does it only just work? And if it only just works, should we be saying that's not good enough? We need something that's several generations away from where we are. We need to say Grenfell is old technology. We need new technology.
Yeah.
We don't need to rehash what was already on there. Grenfell, I think, has its own story. I mean, I don't want to get sued over this, but my understanding of what I've read in the press is that there was some information which wasn't disclosed by the manufacturer in the product. And, how heartbreaking is that for anyone who put that on? No one would have said, let's buy that because it's a bit cheap. It came with a certificate, so it was all done in good faith. I think what's been pretty disgraceful is freeholders being absolutely hung out to dry by the press, saying, why are these guys, owning these buildings, they're death traps. They didn't build them for the large part, or if they did build them, they built them with products that they were told they were allowed to use, and they were built in the right way. And it's in no interest for them to turn around to a leaseholder and say, you've got to pay £20,000 to fix this. It's not the freeholder who's meant to do that. He's already sold the flat. So it falls down to the individual leaseholder. The individual leaseholder thinks, well, I haven't got that money. Well, there should be a government loan scheme in place. Because again, to a certain respect, why should everyone else have to pay for that? Ultimately, I think the companies who made the product, who didn't disclose all the information, should pay for it. A little bit like what happened with asbestos. There's been class action after class action. They're still going on in America. Things that happened in the 60s and the 70s. So if anyone is found to have sat on information and they've got deep pockets, that's who we should be going for. So the British government should be saying, we'll provide a loan scheme at the moment, but we'll go after the manufacturers, or we'll make sure there's a class action against the manufacturers to try and get the money back for as many people. And then maybe they could be then paid into the loans on a pro rata basis and just reduce that down. But if if the government can borrow money at next to nothing, then putting a loan in place for the next 25 years means that fixing this product won't sit on the individual flat owner largely. It will be spread over 25 years through their maintenance fund, and it's a proper way to get over it. And I think unless we have a grown-up approach about dealing with it, we're going to, again, create a whole load of mental health issues with people panicking.
Absolutely.
I can't sell my property. A whole load of people saying, well, I can't actually get it done because there's no one here to do it, because there aren't enough contractors, there isn't enough scaffolding, there aren't enough surveyors to do an EWS1 form, so I don't even know if I need it or not. There's 88,000 buildings in this country that are below 18 metres, so everyone living in those is going to be saying, well, what about me? So there's a lot of things which have got to come into play to really try and solve this solution. None of it should be, at the moment, I think a little bit like COVID. It shouldn't be about blaming people. We need to come up with a solution now. The government, I think, has come up with a great solution with COVID in terms of keeping everyone afloat. So if it can make the money available to get the work done, there will be industries that will get grown up out of this, where people will be trained to go and put the right products on these buildings and get them safe quickly.
That was one of my points, and it's slightly crass, but there is an industry here. There is a huge opportunity for some offshoot of the construction industry to learn how to do this efficiently and effectively, and work its way through the people that are there. But you're right. Somebody needs to pay for it. I think everybody's being a bit reluctant to, until they can stick liability on somebody and see how likely it is they're going to be able to get it back from the company or its insurers.
It is very, very tricky, because if you're a freeholder and you're faced with you might have bought the freehold in a building for £100,000. That building might have a £5 million bill. If it's the only asset you have, I'm not saying every freeholder is like this, but if it's the only asset you have, where are you going to get £5 million, even if the residents are going to give it back to you? But that is the big, I suppose, elephant in the room, which is just being ignored.
And it can only be government, can't it? There's no other source of it.
The bank's not going to lend it. They might lend some of it, but they're not going to lend all of it. No contractor is going to say, I'm going to rock up on the hope and a promise, that you're actually going to pay me when you've told me you haven't got the money. So it's one of those things. And the last thing we want as well is this work starting and stopping, because then there's a whole load of other insured risks, dangers, which will come into play if suddenly a building's stripped. You look at some of the blocks near us, where they took all the outer cladding off, they evacuated all the buildings, and you think, well, where are all these people living? If they just had to live in bed and breakfast or something for, the last year. I mean, it hasn't been joined up enough. So it's a frustrating point. We have got some buildings that are affected by cladding. I don't want to worry everyone. The fireproof is not the only issue with cladding. And how cladding was fixed to buildings is a big issue. That's normally where the warranty holders are paying out.
Yeah.
Because someone is meant to have used a certain size fixing and they haven't done that.
Right.
And the only way you find that out is when a great big sheet of this cladding blows off a building.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just hope and pray it doesn't hit someone.
Doesn't land on anybody, yeah.
Yeah, we had a building where the only way to be certain was we had to have every single panel refixed.
Crikey.
Yeah.
And as you say, I don't think most people are even aware of that.
Yeah, and it's I mean, you just don't want to think about it. But
yeah.
When I see a block of flats and there's a satellite dish on it, I just move onto the front elevation where there's some cladding.
Oh dear, yeah. Ken, we're starting to run out of time, so I must just ask you about film producing, because I have to say I'm quite fascinated. I've never fully understood what is a film producer. Is that effectively the investor, or do you really control and get involved in the making of the film?
Yeah, so well, film producing can be both of those, and there's like everything else, the word producer can have lots of prefixes to it now as well, as different people want to do it. So an actor giving up on some on their fee could be a film producer as well, who may not actually have a financial interest in the film. So I was involved in investing in films and producing films a long time ago, and I stopped doing it. And then I saw a very neat way to promote a lot of what I'm interested in was by making films. So I've got involved in making films that have lead actors who have Down syndrome. And at a very loose level, I've also been involved in making films where there's a benefits that I see to people with Down syndrome. So I've helped produce content for some very famous people where we may not be credited in any way, but where they had a funding gap. And our interest isn't about making money in this. Ultimately, we would like to, but only to recycle the money back into the projects. But if we can recycle our investment each time, if it made money, that's great. If we can recycle the money so we can help more projects get made, then that's also equally as important. So, from what I've been involved with, I mean, actually, tomorrow I have a call with the chief executive of BAFTA. I already sit on probably one of the most forward thinking panels there. They've asked me to be their diversity and inclusion patron, because ours isn't about ticking a box. Ours is actually about generating real change. And what I would like to see, and what I'm moving towards, is I want to see films being made, or I'd like to make films and see other people make films being made with actors who have Down syndrome and actors and disabled actors from other fields, where the part isn't written because of a disability. The part is just given to them because they're good at what they're doing. Yeah. And one of the things which, one of my films, My Feral Heart, people have come up to me and said, "Wow, where did you find that nursing home?" And I said, "Well, what nursing home?" They said, "Well, there's the scene in the nursing home. Where was it?" I said, "Well, it wasn't a nursing home. It was a set." Yeah, they were all actors. They weren't residents of a So actually, it was a good pat on the back that some people thought it was almost like a fly on the wall documentary, rather than actually being a film. So one of the things is also to remind people, these are stories, and until you see some of the actors with disabilities in lots of roles, lots of people just think they're just playing themselves. But actually, I suppose it's like with any actor, until you see them in lots of roles, you don't necessarily realise that they're being a different character. Yeah. The thing which is important to us is we need other producers and distributors to realise that disability makes up 15 to 20% of the population. Yeah. And you can't keep excluding these guys from what they're doing. It's not about giving someone who isn't good at a job. Because again, that's about the most insulting thing anyone could ever do. The only reason someone should go and watch a film is because it's good. And the only way that any of the actors have got into any of our films is because they're good. So that type of thing is very, very important. An actor called Tommy Jessup, who was in our latest film, Innocence, he's the first professional with Down syndrome to be inducted into the BAFTA Elevate program. And to give you an idea of what that means, you can only be involved with that if you're already a big name. But for some reason, there's been a barrier for you really enjoying the success that you should have. So his first meeting was with Martin Scorsese the following week. So, in terms of how this can open up doors, it really is about doing that. It's not about ticking a box and saying PC and woke and whatever badge people think is a nice badge to have. It's actually about really delivering on opportunities and being proud of it and seeing some amazing actors and other people. It doesn't just have to be behind the camera as well, getting a chance to prove who they are. If as an individual you only ever had one shot, and if you had an off day for whatever reason, that was it, you blew it. That's not a fair world. And lots of these guys don't even get that first shot.
Fascinating.
So we can change that.
That really is fascinating, and obviously getting involved in that industry gives you such a wonderful platform. It gives you the ability to reach many more than you could under normal circumstances, I presume.
Well, one of my films, the highest ever cinema on demand film in the UK, and the lead actor has Down syndrome. So you can break so many barriers. Our films get seen by millions of people. I've had 5-star rated films on Sky. One of my films is going to be on the BBC, I believe, on the 21st of March. So again, it's all about trying to get it to a mainstream audience as quickly as we can. So look out for My Feral Heart again.
Will do,
I've seen that on Sky next to The Godfather and Goodfellas, two of my favourite films. And it's listed here. Here's a 5-star film to go and watch.
Right.
Wow.
My Feral Heart, I will definitely give that a look,
Well, as I say, it should be around the 21st of March, which is World Down Syndrome Day. The BBC are screening it.